This show was intended for all audiences, but some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener caution is advised. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Quest. I'm your host, as always, Jeff Harvey. And I know it's been a long time since we've had an episode out. It's been a long wait. I know if those of you who listen to the other show over at geekfeedshow.com, thank you very much. This is our pride and joy, though, this show here. And this week we've actually got a great guest, the creative entity behind one of my current favorite games, which is Hollow-Earth Expeditions, Mr. Jeff Combos. Jeff, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, and also for referring to me as an entity and not human. I think that is a much more accurate description at this point. So.
I thought it was fitting given the upcoming releases that you've got going on. So
yeah, and actually, I'll just go ahead and take both the credit and the blame for you kind of pausing on the podcast for a little while. I've been on Mars really for more than a year, so I deeply appreciate you just holding off the podcast until I came back.
Oh, it was definitely worth the wait, I'm certain. So, so let's talk real quick about your primary claim to fame at the moment, which is Hollow-Earth Expeditions, and then we can go back and get a little bit farther in that. First, before I guess we get into that, tell people where they can find you on the socials media and the webs.
Yeah, so I'm on the Twitter and the Facebook, and of course you can find me on various other media. But my Twitter handle's JACombos, and then my Facebook is JCombos as well. And it's pretty easy to find me because I pretty much always use my first initial last name on various things. So that's the easiest way to track me down.
Awesome. So as I said, you're the creator of Hollow-Earth Expeditions, and just a real quick overview on that so we can get into it a little later, but I want people to understand what we're talking about today.
Yeah, so Hollow-Earth Expedition is a pulp adventure role-playing game. I released it in 2006, and the general idea behind it is it's like Indiana Jones, but with dinosaurs.
Nice. I generally describe it for people who ask me that it's John Carter of Mars meets Indiana Jones in the world of the Lost World.
Oh, that's a great description too. Actually, yeah, I think that's pretty much. It's a hard thing is that the pulp genre is so big, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of investigate different corners of it, and these classic characters will be waiting for you. So John Carter of Mars and Indiana Jones and the Rocketeer and the Shadow. But I found that when I went to put out Hollow-Earth, that trying to get my arms around the whole genre all at once kind of created a mush, right? Like I had to create this all-encompassing game all at once, and really not everybody likes every aspect of pulp because it's this kitchen sink genre. So what I did is I sliced it up. So I actually intentionally took smaller pieces of it instead of the big picture. And so the original Hollow-Earth book is very Indiana Jones. It's you're an explorer or you're an accidental traveler and you end up in the Hollow-Earth either on purpose or an accident, and there you go. And then since then, I've put out source books that kind of pick up the other pieces of pulp. So the Secrets of the Surface World was the first source book, and it's weird science, and so it's the Shadow and the Rocketeer and things like that.
I love the Rocketeer.
And then, me too. And see, what's great about the Rocketeer as a character is he's a retro pulp figure. Right. He was not a 1930s hero, but we think of him and now refer to him in the same breath as some of the others, and I think that's tremendous. But then we did Mysteries of the Hollow-Earth. That's the Lost World stuff that lets you play half-human beast men and all kinds of great stuff from the perspective of the natives of the Hollow-Earth. And then the new book that just is coming out now is Revelations of Mars. So that's the John Carter, that's Barsoom, that's Flash Gordon. And so we really kind of, if you like just one flavor of pulp, you only need to get like one or two books and you're done. If you like them all, get them all. But that focus, I think, has really been one of the reasons that the game has done so well, actually, because people feel like they get a strong flavor instead of just a big mush.
Right. Yeah, I actually used to run a version of the Indiana Jones role-playing game by West End Games for years and years and years, and I actually have supplanted it now with Hex. So.
Oh wow, that's saying something. I have a whole slew of that Indiana Jones RPG stuff on my bookshelf.
Yeah.
It was actually a gift. Somebody handed it off to me that they had collected, and it's one of the nicest things I think anybody's ever given me.
Yeah, it's an amazing set as well. So let's go back to the beginning, to the very, very beginning, David Copperfield style here. So tell us about where you got your start.
Well, I was born with a D20 in my mouth. No, that's not quite true, but it's close. So I am from Southern California originally, and that's an area that is kind of known for movies. And I didn't realize, actually, growing up that where I grew up was unusual. There were tigers and lions and camels on Main Street in my town where I grew up, and the guy who owned them would rent them to movie studios, as for extras and movies and stuff like that. The Dukes of Hazzard, Little House on the Prairie, Chips, Emergency, all of those shows were filmed not too far from where I grew up. And I remember, if anybody listening to this remembers V, the original miniseries.
Oh, absolutely.
When I was a kid, I saw one of their shuttles go by on the back of a truck. The guy who lived next door to my grandparents did the creature design for the giant ants in the movie Them. None of this, I think, really registered on me as being unusual, but I think it instilled in me from an early age this love of storytelling. And not just the storytelling itself, but a real interest in how you create them. Like, I think I wanted to be more behind the camera instead of in front. So I kind of started there. So when I first discovered role-playing games when I was 8, I was primed to be hooked, I think, is how that worked.
Yeah.
And have been playing pretty much ever since.
I can imagine that having those things going down the street every day, or having this in your general life all the time, would help really spark a creative interest in things.
Yeah, but the funny thing is I never really considered going into the movie business. I have a couple of friends who are in the movie business now, but from back then, but it never really even occurred to me.
Yeah. So what did you go into first originally? I mean, if it wasn't the movie industry, you lived out there, and I mean, obviously you're a role-playing fan, but I mean, where did you start?
So my very first freelance writing gig was for White Wolf, and I had got it in kind of a crazy way. So I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. This was sort of the college years, and had been running games, playing games for a long time, and had moved up there, and I caught wind of a big gaming convention in Atlanta called the Grand Masquerade. That was all White Wolf related stuff, and I decided to go. I saved up some money. I caught a red-eye flight. I flew out there. I knew no one at this convention, but I went by myself just because I really wanted to go. I signed up for one of their early live-action role-playing events because I figured that would be a great way to meet people. I went to a couple of panels, pretty much anything that interested me, and I was the only person who showed up to one panel. And the person who was running that panel was a woman by the name of Jennifer Hartshorn, who was the line developer for Wraith at the time.
Oh, okay.
And as it happened, she had gone to college with a couple of people I knew out in the Bay Area and was doing some gaming with. And she had an author who had kind of dropped the ball on her for the Wraith Player's Guide, and she turned to me and said, "Do you think you could give me 10,000 words on Voodoo in the next 4 weeks or so?" And I said, "Oh yeah, oh totally." Knew nothing about Voodoo. I mean, other than kind of general stuff, but had never written anything of that length before, had never really done anything professionally before, but yes, absolutely, I can do that. And I went home and I pounded it out and turned it in and got paid for it. It was pretty amazing. And then I think probably one of the smarter things I did is I put a couple of hooks into it that allowed me to come back and revisit it when they did the Shadow Player's Guide, which they had switched line developers at that point to Rich Dansky, who is, he has been the narrative design lead for all the Tom Clancy video games for years,
right.
And a very successful guy now.
Yeah, so you've Wraith was one of those games that was hard for a lot of people to get into, but it's a good place to start. I mean, White Wolf is, especially the older system, was a gateway for a lot of people to get into gaming. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Wraith is a tough game to play, I think. Though because of the shadow nature of it, because it's hard for people to work against themselves a lot, and then when you have somebody else playing your bad side, they don't always do it right, because they don't understand your character the same way that you do. But when it works, it's really amazing.
Yes, yeah. The nuance of that game, a lot of my friends decided they didn't want to play it because it was too much for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So where did you head after White Wolf, after doing the freelance for White Wolf?
Well, I actually ended up getting sucked into the tech industry.
Right.
And I spent about 7 years or so doing the high-tech thing, and a small company that I worked for actually was purchased by Cisco Systems, so big tech company, right as that tech bubble was bursting. So it's not unlike, kind of getting pulled out of the water by the Titanic when icebergs are taking everybody else down.
Right.
Like I never had to worry about my job when so many of my peers and friends were going through the kind of tech bubble burst.
Right.
So that was kind of an amazing situation, and yet I felt a little dissatisfied. There was definitely something that just wasn't quite right, and I was still playing games and stuff like that, but something just wasn't really sitting right with me. And then my mom got involved, and so I give my mother the blame here, and she knows I do this. But the other thing about the way I grew up is my mom has a degree in video production. So growing up as a kid, there was always video equipment around, and so she would teach me stuff about it, and I would play around with it. And she is now a snowbird, so her and her husband winter in Arizona, and they spend these summers in Alaska. So I see them twice a year. They drive through town, and on one of these trips, my mother did what parents do, and she showed up with a box of my stuff. And she said, "Here, I found this. You can have it back now." And inside it were all of these videotapes that I had made when I was a kid, and they were full of some of the worst stop-motion animation you've ever seen in your life. I mean, it was just terrible, horrible, awful stuff. And but watching it really struck me that I had been trying to tell stories my whole life.
Right.
And why was I not doing this every day?
Right. Was this sometime around 2005, I assume?
Actually, this was about 2002, 2003.
Okay.
And so that was kind of a wake-up call. In 2003, I founded Exile Game Studio, my game company, but I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with it or what my flagship product would be. And I actually chased a license for a movie for an RPG for a number of months, probably 9 months or more, and ended up that didn't work out. So I ended up deciding to do something on my own, and being the very wise, very business savvy person who creates a role-playing game company, I decided I would create a pulp role-playing game.
Right.
And oh, by the way, I'd make my own system for it too, because all of these things scream success.
Absolutely, especially in that time frame.
Oh yeah, that time frame was big D20.
Yeah.
Lots of D20 games coming out. My feeling was that I thought there was going to be some fatigue with D20. I didn't realize how much fatigue there was going to be. It would kind of implode.
Right.
But I thought there was going to be some fatigue. People would be ready for something a little different. I didn't like the variance that you would get with a 20-sided die. I'm also kind of a probability and statistics geek.
Right.
So I wanted to do something a little bit different. I pulled a little bit from my White Wolf experiences and added some other things into it, some homebrew stuff I'd been working on for a long time, and created the Ubiquity system.
Right.
That ends up powering Hollow Earth Expedition, and I ended up licensing it to several other companies who have made their own games with it too.
So you created Ubiquity, which is a 50-50 percentile, correct?
Yes,
So
yes. And I do that. So it's a dice pool system. So anybody who
right,
doesn't know, it's a dice pool system. You roll a handful of dice, and then you count the dice that are even numbers. That's
right.
the easy way to do it.
So kind of a success based
Hmm.
with good probabilities. You also created some special dice that go along with it, but I love, and I had to
Yeah,
go out of my way to
yeah.
find us out of those dice. By the way, they were hard to get.
Oh, really? Yeah. They are around. Gosh, I don't know how many of these I've sold worldwide at this point, but I mean a fair number. It's been kind of amazing.
Yeah.
When I mentioned that I'm a probability and statistics geek, that's sort of shorthand. I actually have a dice patent.
Right.
So those dice that you have are basically the math underlying them is binomial distribution, and I applied it to an 8-sided dice. So these aren't a fancy patent. Like, I'm not actually that smart. Design patents are actually very different from a manufacturing patent.
Right.
This basically means, oh, you did something clever by applying two things, together. That's pretty much how that works.
Right.
But yeah, what they are is. Let me take a step back. So with Ubiquity, I wanted to fix two problems with dice pool systems, and hopefully anybody who's not a game systems person, I won't lose you, but I'll do my best here. So the thing with dice pool games is that you roll too many dice too often.
Right.
So there are some games out there where you're rolling 10, 12, 14 dice, and you're doing it 5 times. So the example I use is you pick a lock, you roll some dice. You enter a room and search it, you roll some dice. You roll some dice to hear somebody's coming, and then you roll some more dice when you jump out the window. And if you're rolling 8 to 10, 12 dice each time, it's a lot of clatter on the table.
Yes.
So I wanted to minimize both of those things. So the way I minimized the number of times you roll dice is with that 50-50 target number. So because it's 50-50, you can take any dice pool, you can cut it in half, and on average, that's how many successes you'll get.
Right.
So that 8 dice in your dice pool means on average you'll roll 4 successes.
Right.
So if that average is higher, equal to or higher than the difficulty, don't bother rolling the dice.
Right.
So in that example, I pick the lock, I search the room, I hear somebody coming, and I only roll dice when I jump out the window and it's dramatically appropriate.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, it's kind of a for those people who listen to the show and don't know the system very well or want something to compare it to, it's a lot like taking 10 in D20.
Yes.
It's a nice feature. I like it. I'm a fan of dice pool games myself, and my particular favorite, of course, is Legend of the Five Rings. And the drawback of that game is while you only roll 10 dice and you only keep so many dice, you still have to add the numbers together. So you add in the idea of the White Wolf success based, which makes it quicker, and then you make it even simpler by going with the Ubiquity. And it's, to me, it seems like a very distilled system, and I'm actually really fond of the Ubiquity system. So I think you did a great job.
I wanted to do all the complex math away from the table. Like, I wanted to do as much of it as I could, myself, and then put into the book just the way it works. So if somebody wanted to dig, they could really understand how it statistically held together. But for people who just wanted to play, can play. And one of the things that makes Ubiquity so fast is the taking the average. So when I run games as a game master, I never roll dice. I can't tell you the last time I rolled dice as a game master, because I can just say, you've got 4 Nazis, they're all attacking everybody at the table, and I know that on average they have 4 successes on their attack. So everybody rolls their defense, and it's resolved simultaneously, and now I'm done, and the spotlight is back on the player characters. So you never hear me rolling dice behind the Game Master screen for 12 NPCs. It just doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah, it's the swift way to go. Okay, so it's 2000, and you said 2000 and 2003. You've just founded Ubiquity Games. I'm sorry, Exile Games, the Ubiquity system. What was it? What was next?
Oh well, let me tell you about the dice though. We actually we're going to talk about the dice for a quick second. So so the taking the average is roll less often, but I wanted to roll less dice too. Right, I still didn't like the idea of throwing 14 dice across the table.
Right.
So that's when I started just sort of poking at this, and I figured if that's how it worked out, that would be fine. But by using binomial distribution, which is basically the math of like coin flipping, because that's all that matters is something a success or is it not? Do I count it yes or no?
Right.
And so I created these dice that are, binary dice. They have ones and zeros on them. And that is, yes, I count it, no, I don't. But then I applied that to the 8-sided dice. So there's a white die that's zeros and ones. There's a red die that's zeros, ones, and twos, and a blue die that's 0, 1, 2, and 3.
Mm-hmm.
So by using these dice, you can roll up to 1/3 less dice, and then you don't have to parse them. You don't have to say yes, no, yes, no. You just add up the face value. So that's kind of how they came about there, and you can mix and match them any way you want as long as the total value adds up to what you're after. So they're kind of a bell and whistle. You don't really need them for the game, but right. What I do is I don't do this anymore, but I used to put out regular dice, and then I put out the Ubiquity dice, and just let my players pick and choose, and they pretty quickly stopped using regular dice. They won't play without the Ubiquity stuff.
You were saying you, as a GM, almost never roll dice anymore. I bought those dice, and I like them so much. I sometimes roll dice just to be able to use them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like I'm a guy who designed his own dice, and I created them, and I make them, and I never use them.
Yeah. No, it's definitely interesting, and I know that I don't know if you have them available on your website, but if you do, we'll link them for sure in the show notes. If not, I think I found them on Amazon, the set that I had. So
yeah, they're on Amazon. I've got them, and actually you can order them through your favorite local game store. Just walk in and have them order you a set.
Absolutely. So anyways, back to... we said it was 2002, 2003, and you've just founded
2003. I founded the company. Probably about 2004-ish. I had given up on a licensed product and had really decided to do Hollow Earth Expedition. And by the beginning of 2005, I quit my high-paying tech job to do games.
Right. Did you go to, it looks like, I have here that in 2007 you went to Hidden City Games.
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. So in 2006 I launched Hex, and I've never, I didn't really worry about working on the game. I worked on it incredibly hard, especially towards the end of the first book. 20-hour days and all that kind of fun stuff. But I didn't really allow myself to pause and think about whether it was going to be well received or not. I think I just wanted it to be good, and I had a picture in my head of what I wanted that to be, and I just wanted it to come out as close to that picture as I could until the night before Gen Con opened in 2006. And at that night, I was gripped suddenly with just existential terror. I just knew the book was going to finally be out and people would see it, and just please don't suck.
Right.
And luckily it didn't, and people found it and they liked it, and I've been able to do more ever since. But now across the aisle from us at Gen Con was Hidden City Games, which at the time was pushing a product called Clout. And it was, if people don't know, Hidden City Games was founded by most of the original Wizards of the Coast people.
Right.
So, and owner of Gen Con himself, Peter Atkinson and Jesper Meerfors and Paul Peterson, who was one of the first Magic R&D people, and I got to know them and chatted with them. And about probably less than a year, maybe 9 months after meeting them at Gen Con, they contacted me about needing somebody to come in and help them with their stuff and kind of to really be a project manager and producer. Which I had a little bit of experience with, and certainly had put out, a good game. So I figured I could help them out, and so I ended up, joining them at Hidden City Games. But I did not end up working on Clout, which is what I originally thought I was going to do. I ended up working on Bella Sara.
Okay.
And so Bella Sara is a collectible card game. It's a little light on the game aspect of it, but it's a collectible card game about magical horses for young girls.
I hadn't actually never heard of that one before, so.
Yeah. So I went from Nazis and dinosaurs to, unicorns.
To My Little Pony, almost.
Yeah, and Pegasi. And part of my job was to work directly with the license holder, who is she's a Danish ex-social worker who had seen her son playing with Pokemon cards and her daughter kind of joining in, but really feeling like her daughter was underserved. There really wasn't a product for her.
Right.
So she created Belisara, and each one of the horse cards has an uplifting saying on it, and it was her being a social worker. It was targeted at the kind of 10 to 14-year-old age group for girls, where for some reason their self-esteem tends to take a hit, and to kind of try to bolster that. And the really cool part about it is that every card had a unique digital code on it that you could go to the website, type it in, and then you would get the digital version of the horse that you could then take care of and play with. And so it was really, this was year 2007, this was kind of ahead of its time when it came to kind of transmedia, digital and physical, linked experience. Pretty cool.
That's a really interesting idea, kind of a cross between a collectible card game and virtual pets.
Yes, yeah. So I really enjoyed working at Belisara, and actually it was a lot of fun to go into work every day and just work on something so just wholesome and happy and uplifting. And then I would go home at night and work on Nazis and dinosaurs. But right. Yeah, it was pretty cool. In 2008, I had gone over the person who done the cover art for Hollow Earth Expedition. He is a fantastic artist and had been working at a game company not too far away from me in Seattle, and I had gone over and run my game for them. They were fans and gamers as well. And one day he said, "Hey, come over and have lunch with me." I said, "Sure." I came over and ended up having lunch with the 3 founders of this game company, Airtight Games, and found myself suddenly in a job interview. They kind of ambushed me with a job interview and ended up hiring me. So I ended up leaving Hidden City Games, going over to work on a video game, console game, about shooting robots in the face and flying around with a jetpack.
Very nice. That's kind of more up your alley as far as the stuff you were working on, though.
That was part of the reason I ended up taking it. Is I really wanted to work on the console space, and yeah, it was
right.
Certainly thematically up my alley.
Speaking of your artist for the cover of Hollow Earth, Hollow Earth's cover actually won a Silver ENnie Award in 2007.
It sure did, yeah. And that was Stephen Daniele. That's the cover artist, and he's just There's a little funny story about that too. So I was looking around for a cover artist for Hex. This was 2005-ish, maybe into 2004. And one of the guys I know knew Steven and said, "You should meet this guy. Like, you guys should just meet for lunch and tell him what you're working on." And so I met Steven, and we'd never met each other. Had an acquaintance in common, and that was it. And I said, "Well, I've got this crazy idea about Nazis and dinosaurs and the Hollow Earth, and it's a role-playing game. And what do you think? Is this something you might be interested in doing the cover for?" And he looked at me across the table and said, "What are you doing after lunch? I'd like to show you what I'm working on in my studio." And we'd go to studio, and he had been drawing people riding flying dinosaurs for fun.
Very nice.
And from that moment on, we have been friends.
Right. And
so I'm really lucky that he's not only just a fantastic and talented contributor, but he's just a great guy.
Right. Yeah, that's it's always nice when you can find that one person that you kind of just click with and can actually do something nice with.
So, yeah, absolutely.
So you went to Airtight Games in 2008, you say? And
yes.
You worked on Dark Void.
Yes, I worked on Dark Void. That was the jetpack and robot face shooting game. Which was a ton of fun. And for people who have never worked in the video game industry, it was just like what you might have expected, which was I worked with a tremendous. That game was not very well received critically. I am deeply, deeply proud of the work that we put into it. It was a lot of hard work for sure, and I got brought in not from the beginning, but actually to help them get it out the door. So I had much less creative impact on that particular title than I have had with some of the other stuff I've worked on. But we ended up going through a period of there was 2 months where we worked 5 days a week, 10 to 12 hours a day. And then there were 5 months where we worked 7 days a week, 10 to 12-hour days.
Yeah. And
over the course of that period of time, we lost 2 people, and one of them quit because he had to. His wife's job was moving, and so they ended up kind of going back to Canada essentially. We only had one person who actually just went, I can't. I'm not cut out for this. And everybody else was just an amazingly talented and dedicated group of people who just really just pushed through that game. It was really pretty amazing, and I learned a lot. Like, I would not trade what I learned on Dark Void for the world, because it's really taught me a lot about the way that creative teams should be run and managed. And because of that, I was able to talk I didn't really talk them into it at the time. They offered me an executive producer position and kind of running my own team there for a while, which was great. I did end up talking them to letting us work on our own game for a while, which was really neat. But then Microsoft came calling, so I ended up going to Microsoft, where I was a narrative producer, and that was a ton of fun because I worked with a group of writers inside Microsoft.
Right.
So the people I worked with, there was a couple of people who were very well-renowned authors, novelists. One of the guys had written some TV shows. We had a guy who had worked on Spin City. We had a guy who'd done Law and Order. It was just a tremendous group of people, and I really had my mind open to transmedia, which was really kind of a fun thing. And the big project that I worked on at Microsoft, I think, will come out at the end of this year. Actually, it's a video game called Quantum Break.
Okay.
And Quantum Break is a third-person shooter where your main character has the ability to manipulate time, speed things up, slow it down, stuff like that.
Nice.
What makes it different is that you will play the game, and then there will be a live-action TV show that is a companion piece for it.
Okay.
So that'll come out on the Xbox will probably stream it to you. But as you play the game, it changes the TV show. So the way I play the game and the show that I watch will be different than the one that you would experience.
Oh, interesting. So the show was not like was it Divergence? I think was the name of the show that was out for a little while.
Right.
That it was just you're playing in the same universe. This is actually you're affecting a narrative based on what you play.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people know Defiance, right? Like that's the game where it's a massively multiplayer game, and the way that we watched very closely how they did things. Mm-hmm. The way they worked it is that they had the game which led to what happened in the series. So they would introduce things. Sorry, I have that backwards. They would show you things in the TV show that then would ripple into the game. So you would see an invasion of aliens in the TV show, and then they would show up in the game, and you'd have to deal with them.
Right.
And we reverse that process. So what we do is with Quantum Break is that you play the game, and it changes what happens in the TV show.
Really interesting.
You can binge watch the TV show. It's not like episode. I mean, it's episodic, but it's not going to come out like 1 week, next week, third week. It's really gated by how much you play the game.
Right.
So I really got to work with a couple of very talented writers, and we brought in a screenwriter from Hollywood and got to really create a live-action TV show. And then what I really spent about 18 months banging my head against was the connective tissue between the game and the show, mm-hmm. and the way that those two things interacted with each other. And so we only worked on it up through the end of the pre-production, and then when games are done with the pre-production, they go into production, which is supposed to be when you just need to make it.
Right.
But so much changes between production and finishing the game that the people I know who are still working on it, I think it's changed a lot since I worked on it, but I can't wait to see how it turns out.
Yeah, it sounds like a choose-your-own-adventure video game / TV show. That's pretty amazing.
It's we were lucky enough that Microsoft allowed us to film a pilot episode mm-hmm. Of the TV show, and so I got to fly to LA, and I was down there not for the whole thing, but for a couple of night shoots where we were up pretty much all night, and got to see them film not only the main through line, but also a couple of these alternate versions. So, and this is not going to spoil anything because the pilot episode's very different from what is going to be in the show,
right?
Or in the official version that's released. But depending on a choice that you make in the game, one of the main characters lives or dies. So
nice.
you kind of get to see how that all plays out, which is really neat.
Start out big.
Yeah.
So during all of this time, you were still working on Hollow Earth. Obviously, you've got you won another silver ENnie for best supplement for Secrets of the Surface World, and a gold ENnie for the best supplement for Mysteries of the Hollow Earth.
Yeah, so in the middle of all of this, I'm still putting out some Hollow Earth stuff. It definitely had an impact on how quickly I could get things out the door.
Right.
So some of the books are kind of farther apart than I would have liked. But I put out Mysteries of the Hollow Earth, which was this is the Hollow Earth from the inside out. This is you play the characters that are in there, and it's got a bigger bestiary and all that fun stuff. And we, like we do with everything, just submitted our names to the Origins Awards and the ENnie Awards, which are, I think people don't know, very big industry awards. They're given out at Gen Con every year, and they are by vote, right? Public vote.
Right.
So there are judges that kind of put you on the short list, and I was just literally pleased to be nominated for Mysteries. But who we were nominated with was not making me feel like we were gonna win.
Oh yeah.
D&D was in there. Wizards had a game in there. One of their books was in there. One of the players' handbooks, I think. There was some other stuff in there, and so when we sat down for the award ceremony, they announced I think the silver, bronze winner maybe first, and then the silver. And I was just turning to my friend because they had not announced D&D, and I was just turning him to explain how we couldn't possibly win when they said our names.
That's always a nice thing. It's kind of that stunned camera across the Oscar crowd thing.
Yes. So I have one book and that actually has a gold ENnie that beat out D&D.
There you go.
Oh, that's I still don't believe that. That's just crazy town to me.
Maybe they miscounted. I don't know.
I would not be surprised, but I was not going to ask.
No, absolutely not. Take it and run.
Exactly.
I've got a copy of the Secrets of the Hollow Earth one. I think is the one I'm thinking of. I don't have it directly in front of me at the moment. Yeah. Secrets of the Surface World. I mean, well, that's the one. Is you got a little like Nazis and super science in that one, right?
Yes, indeed.
So explain real quick the three. You've got the two supplements that are currently out, plus an adventure book, and then you've got a third supplement coming out. So do a quick review of like what the supplements that you have out now are. I mean, there's Mysteries, Secrets, and then Revelations.
Yeah. So like I was mentioning a little earlier, so I sliced up pulp. So the Secrets of the Surface World is the secret societies and weird science stuff. And that's the one that we got the silver ENnie award for. And that one I think really was a nice book to come out because the first book was Indiana Jones, and this really made the Surface World a place that you would want to stay and not just run into the Hollow Earth.
Right.
So that one's been a lot of fun. And then the Mysteries one, really you could do a couple of things. You could either run into the Hollow Earth and stay there, or you could even turn everything inside out and take a character from the Hollow Earth and pull them out into the Surface World.
Right, a very interesting idea, something that we actually did, even though I don't have that book yet.
Yeah. And then Revelations of Mars, which actually is out electronically now. You can get the PDF on DriveThru RPG, for example.
Yeah, we'll have a link to it in the show notes.
Great. And then the physical copies are going to come out a little later this year. I'll have some at Gen Con if people are going to be there, but then the book will hit your local game stores after that. Distribution takes a couple of weeks for things to actually get through, but you can if you're interested, you can have your local game store order you a copy, and they'll get it as soon as it comes in. But that one is John Carter and Flash Gordon, and I will tell you without reservation that Revelations was the hardest book I've ever put out.
Mm-hmm. Why is that?
It took me a good year longer than I had expected to complete it.
I did say I was going to say it felt like it took a long time. I remember at Gen Con last year you said you were getting close, and then
yeah. Yeah, and this is not and it makes this a little different is that I was working on other stuff, video game stuff and things while I was working on the other books, and with Revelations, I was really fortunate enough to be able to do a Kickstarter at a time when I left Microsoft to work on my own stuff again, and I thought, hey, this is great. I'll be able to every day just work on this, and it'll be fantastic, and I'll get it done. Matter of fact, I'll think I'll write more of it. I figured, hey, I was probably going to write between 40 to 60% of the book, and no problem. I'll add a few pages to it, and we'll make it even cooler. The problem with Revelations is, unlike the other books, the surface world, if you look at the inspirational media around that, there's a lot of books and comic books and movies and stuff that generally agree with what the surface world looked like, right? We know what the political situation was like in 36.
Right.
We know what Weird Science looks like. I mean, there's a lot there to pull from. Even the Hollow Earth, there's a lot of agreement among the literature of what that is. It's full of dinosaurs. It either never gets dark or it gets dark every once in a while. There's really all the lost civilizations. There's a lot of agreement about what that should look like.
Right.
When you start looking at planetary romance, there is not a lot of agreement about what Mars would look like.
Yeah, that's true. Especially, you're talking about an era where, pulp was everything. Especially, some of my favorite authors are, Lovecraft and Howard, which they didn't write a lot about Mars, but that era, the Weird Tales magazines and stuff, there's a lot of stuff in those that's, I wouldn't say contradictory, but enlightening.
There was a much wider, I think, canvas to paint on.
Yeah.
And so people really did go kind of crazy, and even Howard had a posthumous story about Mars that ended up getting published, but there just wasn't a lot of agreement about what the aliens look like, what was there. There did, because of the heavy influence from Edgar Rice Burroughs, this notion of Mars being a dying planet. That really was some agreement. So for what I've been trying to do with Hollow Earth Expedition this whole time is to make something that feels like pulp, that is recognizable and has the same sort of texture to it that you would expect from a fan from books and comics and stuff, but is unique and different.
Right.
So, and that turned out to be much harder target to hit with Revelations. And I will tell you that one of my first attempts, which was to make it a little more Flash Gordon, I even had sample character art done. I printed them up. I took it to Gen Con. I showed it to everybody, and it did not work.
Yeah.
Ended up, the feedback I got on it, nobody told me this failed, but to me it failed. Like, it was not what I was intending to do, so it was not a direction I wanted to go. But the feedback on it was, this felt like the Hollow Earth, like an extension of the Hollow Earth, because I was playing up more of the half-human Beastmen characters.
Sure.
And so that required me to really go back to the foundation, look at the vision of what I was trying to do, and then rebuild from the ground up. So I've probably rewritten Revelations 2 or 3 times to just try to get it to the point where I feel like it's hitting the familiar but different.
Right. So you're trying to maintain some of the feel of the original work, but separate it enough that it can be its own entity, essentially. Yeah,
and in some cases with like Mysteries of the Hollow Earth, I can actually say this is more like a bunch of tools, right? This is a toolkit. I'm not telling you where the mole men live. I'm telling you that they exist. And actually, for the longest time, I resisted people asking me for a map of the Hollow Earth. I used to get asked that all the time. What does it look like? Where is everything? And I was like, I don't want to tell you that. I want you guys to not feel constrained by that, but to make the Hollow Earth your own.
Right.
And with Mysteries, I did actually, I finally gave in, and there is a map on the inside of the book of the Hollow Earth, but it has no names on it.
Right.
that is my way of saying, okay, here's your map, but you still have to fill in the gap. I couldn't do that with Mars. There wasn't this general understanding that I could rely upon, And I realized pretty quickly that I needed to develop a Mars that had history, that was a place that fit within the Hex universe, and drew a lot upon the intellectual property development work that I did at Microsoft to really try to create something that felt real. It had not just a history, but there's Atlanteans on Mars. There are god kings that live there, and so there's a religion that kind of goes along with that too. So it was a lot of work to kind of get everything together to make it finally fit together the way I wanted it to. I shared it out with my Kickstarter backers at various times. I've tried to keep them in the loop this entire time, and I will tell you that my very, very favorite response thus far from anybody who has gotten the finished book, are 2 words: worth it.
Very good.
That's all I needed to hear.
Yeah. It's one of the ones I've been really looking forward to for a long time. It's the cover art alone and some of the other art you've put out for it really sparks an imagination. I was looking forward to this one coming out. I was going to pick up a copy of it this week, actually, the digital copy. So,
I know a guy.
You do know a guy.
I can help you with that. But the thing about the artwork is that ended up being also another challenge with this game, or this particular book. The cover art, fantastic. The character art, I also think is very good. The artist I got to do that is a guy that I had worked with at Airtight. He was a concept artist there, thought his work was really fantastic. When he left Airtight, he was hired at Industrial Lights and Magic and worked on the Clone Wars series. So I basically called in a personal favor to get him to do the characters for Mars.
Very nice.
People, they know who he is. His dance card is full, and I was very lucky. Art's a very big part of all these books, but I got people kind of earlier in their careers, and people figured out how great they are, and then when I added things to the book, or I needed to rework pieces of the vision, I slipped out of their calendar. Right, I lost my window to work with the artists that I had normally worked with, and then had to scramble to find people to fill their shoes, which is not an easy task.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's finding artists is never an easy thing to do, and when you get ones that are really good, it's I mean, the nice thing about the artwork that you have, it's fairly consistent in thematic feel to me, anyways. I think you do. It's a very good job of depicting what you're trying to get across too. So I think it reminds me very much of the old D&D second edition book, and even the new D&D fifth edition book. There, the rather than just being pictures that happen to be in the book to do whatever, they actually complement the creative aspect for GMs and players. It's very, very good.
Thank you. I'm a big fan of environmental storytelling, which is, there are things that you depict that you get into people's brains without having to spell it out completely.
Right.
So an example too, and this is maybe a little bit more subtle, is that if you look at Secrets of the Surface World, a lot of the art in that book is black and white. And not just, I don't mean black and white in that's the color scheme, but it's a lot of hard lines and dark shadows.
Right.
It's a very, very clean delineation between the two.
Yeah, so very noir styling.
Very noir. And then if you look at Mysteries of the Hollow Earth, particularly when you get into like the Beastmen chapter, it's very loose artwork style. It's very rough. And that's by design. I picked an artist who would do that, so the artwork in that chapter would feel more primitive, right? To get across that similar thing. So I tended to break up artists by chapter, so that way each chapter would have the right feel to it art-wise that you would expect, without trying to kind of taking a bunch of artists and then putting their work throughout the book in various spots. Right.
Talk a little bit about. I forgot where I was going to go with that. You said that you had licensed your system out to other games as well. We talked about Ubiquity earlier, and we obviously know that Hollow Earth is a very fun game. But what other things can we see Ubiquity in?
So Ubiquity got licensed to a company called Greymalkin that did a kind of fantasy game, a kind of fantasy world turned inside out where magic kind of blew up in everybody's faces called Desolation. That was the first licensee. Then I licensed it to Triple Ace Games, and Triple Ace Games, boy, those guys are great. They're in the UK. Their head writer is a guy by the name of Wiggy. Love Wiggy. He is, boy, I wish I was as prolific as him. That guy can write. He and his business partner Robin put out a game called Regime Diabolique, or All for One, and it is a Three Musketeers monster hunting game.
Right.
That is all based on Ubiquity. They followed that up with Leagues of Adventure, which is a like Victorian steampunk a game that they are now expanding into the gothic horror realm. I think they just announced that, so they did that one. There is a more modern day monster hunting game coming out that's Ubiquity called Quantum Black. There's a couple more things I've licensed, but I can't actually talk about them just yet.
Right.
That are coming down the pike, and I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody actually.
Space 1889.
Space 1889, well, yeah, of course, Space 1889. So this was an interesting story because my German language licensee, so Hollow Earth Expedition, not only did it come out in the U.S. And people liked it, which I'm so thankful for, that I ended up also getting contacted by a French licensee and a German licensee, and just recently signed a Spanish licensee. So those guys are putting out versions of the books. And in some cases, I think even improving them. I mean, I will be the first person to tell you that I am actually not that smart. And in this case, the French made a far superior Game Master screen to me, and I'm absolutely stealing their design for the Mars one that I'm working on right now. I will totally admit that. But the German language licensee really liked Ubiquity. They liked what was there, and had managed to get the German language only license for Space 1889.
Nice.
And so then they approached me and said, we'd really like to do it as Ubiquity. And I said, I would be honored. I mean, Space 1889 is a classic.
Yeah, it's one of the
that's great.
All-time best, well, not best, but one of the all-time classic games for sure.
Absolutely. So I just, fell all over myself to say yes to that one, knowing that it would never see the light of day in English. There are other companies who are working with Space 1889. Savage Worlds has a version of it that I think is fantastic. Both Pinnacle and my game company both have the same. We're under the same umbrella from a distributor and consolidator. I know Shane and his crew; they're awesome people. So I did not intend to try to steal their thunder. Just German language, let's do it. They put it out, it was well received, and then kind of the stars aligned, and they managed to figure out how to get the English language license as well. So my German language licensee was putting out the English language version of the book, and they did it with Ubiquity.
Very nice.
Yeah.
I have to
just amazing.
I did not realize until I was doing some research for the show that Space 1889 was actually going to be Ubiquity, and I was not a huge fan of the old system, but I liked the old setting, so I may have to go pick up a copy of the English version.
Yeah, mine just showed up a couple weeks ago, and I love it. It's great.
Yeah,
they did a wonderful job.
So before we get into the last segment of the show, let's talk real quick about what you have coming out. You said you have a GM screen coming out. Are you working on anything else?
Yeah, so as part of the Kickstarter did really well for Revelations of Mars. So the book, the big thing, the book is coming out, is out, and then there's a Game Master screen that'll go along with that, and then there's going to be at least 3 adventures. So there are 3 what I call Perils of Mars adventures that are coming out. So that'll be a part of that, and more than likely a 4th one as well. So all of that is coming out this year. We'll see what else I can manage to get in there. I've been talking to a few other people about some things. So and Gen Con stuff always falls out of Gen Con. That's fun and interesting. So some stuff there. And next year is the 10th anniversary of Hollow Earth Expedition. It's been around, and it's been selling, and people are still playing this crazy game since 2006. So I want to do something special for it, and so I think if people have not heard of it and they want to get in on it now, it's a fantastic time.
Well, hopefully more people will hear about it after this show, and I I am definitely interested to see what happens for a 10th anniversary, and maybe we'll have you back on the show for that for sure.
I think anybody who can get over their intense dislike of me after listening to me ramble on, but will play the game, I think, please, thank you.
We've talked about the game a couple times in the show. I actually have a review episode we wrote, but we never actually put out, where we did a live play. It was a lot of fun. I
love listening to the live plays.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah.
We were going to do them. We had a whole section that we were going to do live plays. We did Hollow Earth Expedition. We did the Firefly RPG, which I picked up at Gen Con last year. And we picked up one called Luchador by Spartan Games. That was a lot of fun. But we got attacked.
We got attacked by the Luchadors, actually, when we were at Gen Con. Yeah, we had a friendly rivalry. My great friend and right-hand guy, Sechin Tower, who has now gone on to he's written his own version of young adult fiction called Mad Science University. He's a big Luchador fan and had picked a fight with them. And so, there was a little bit of shenanigans between us one year. It was fun.
Yeah, I almost missed their booth last year when I was walking past them. I was heading towards the Palladium booth, and I walked past, and it dawned on me like a half second later that there's a giant man standing there in a Luchador mask, and I had to go back to find out what was going on with that. So, those guys were a lot of fun. I almost missed you too. I walked right past you, and then you said something, and you were very funny. I couldn't hear very well, but I remember everything you said was very funny. So,
well, if it was funny, it wasn't me. I'm sure it was somebody else.
Well, I know it was you because you told me that you spell your name, you pronounce your name just like the food, the snack food. So.
Oh yeah, I don't want much. I would just like maybe a dime per bag. I'm really, it's not too much to ask, I don't think.
Those rich royalties on the combos bags, that'd be the way to go.
Yeah. So one last weird little story.
Yeah.
I have somebody who brings me Combos pretzels every year at Gen Con. Now, I do not recommend eating food that people give you randomly ever, particularly at a convention. And the only reason I accept them from this particular person is because he is the owner of the Guinness Book World Records dice collection.
Oh, nice.
And the first year that Hollow Earth came out, he was walking past my booth. You can always recognize him because Kevin has this fantastic hat with a big kind of bouncing D20 on it. He was walking past my booth. He looks down and he sees the Ubiquity dice and keeps walking. And he goes maybe 3 paces, stops, and like the backup lights came on, and walked like right back. And he said, "What are those?" I said, "Well, those are my dice." He's like, "Yeah, but I haven't seen them before." Yeah, and I don't think anybody has. They're brand new. I had them made. He was like, "No, you didn't." I did. I really did. I'm like, I even have a patent on them, like the whole thing. He's like, "Really?" And he was so caught off guard. He actually has friends in like the patent offices and knows dice manufacturers who will let him know ahead of time that that things are coming out. And for some weird reason, I had slipped under his radar. And so they had come out, and he didn't know about them. So I gave him a set, and so every year he comes by to make sure I haven't snuck one past him again.
Very nice. You had some poker chips there too that were used. Those were pretty cool too.
Yeah. So the other thing about the game system is it runs on style.
Right.
Like all the dice stuff, all the taking the average. Like I actually consider that to be very important, but also not the soul of the game, like not the heart of the game.
Right.
The heart of the game is motivations and flaws. So every character has a motivation and they have a flaw that hurts them. A lot of games might have things like, oh, well, you can take one eye and you have an eye patch, and that gives you more points so you can bump up your dexterity or something. And I find that those flaws, people tend to forget about them once the game starts.
Yes.
So instead, you do not get any points for taking a flaw. Instead, every time that flaw hurts you in the game, you get a style point.
Right.
And then you get to spend that style point for bonus dice. So basically, the more fun you have with your character, even when bad stuff's happening to you, the better you do. And so there's various ways to track that. I know people who just track them on pieces of paper. I know people who use M&Ms, gummy bears, and one group that uses spent shell casings, which I think is kind of crazy.
That's pretty good.
I like poker chips. I like poker chips. So I made poker chips with art on it from the game. There's different character art on each one. And so every time I put out a book, I do a short run of these style chips. And when they're gone, they're gone.
Yeah. I unfortunately that's something I did go looking for and they were hard to find. But I do use poker chips. Back in when Seventh Sea came out, they had drama dice, and that we started using poker chips back for Seventh Sea's drama dice system. And,
I love Seventh Sea.
Yeah, it's one of the best games.
Yeah.
All right, so the next segment of the show we normally do, it's kind of like inside the actor studio kind of thing. But before we get into that, let's tell people real quick where they can get your games. Obviously, they can get them at exilestudios.com.
Yep.
Where else?
So also your favorite local game store. Like if you have a favorite local game store, you can walk in and we work with everybody. So my distributor, the reason I signed up with them is because they work with everybody. Mm-hmm. So if you want something, you can have them order it for you and they can get it from the distributor guaranteed. Every time I hear from somebody that they can't, I call my guy and they call that guy and it gets resolved. So that's good. If that doesn't work for you, if you don't have a favorite local game store, we're available on Amazon as well. And then if you like the electronic stuff, hit up DriveThru RPG. They've got everything.
Yep. Support your local game stores, though. You got to keep those guys around.
That's number one.
So, all right. So every show we do, and every interview show we do anyways, we try to do kind of just a set of random questions, not random, but, the same questions over and over. So the opposite of random. We tailor them a little bit for everybody.
Are they premeditated questions?
They are premeditated for us, but not for you. That makes them more fun.
Okay.
But before we get deep into the crazy ones, obviously you're an RPG guy, and I asked Liz Tice from Realmworks the same question. What's your favorite RPG setting, and really why is it your favorite?
Okay, this is totally true because it's coming right off the top of my head. I have this weird fascination with Fading Suns.
Okay, I've not heard of that one.
Fading Suns is it's like Dune. It's like a space fantasy game that was put out by Holistic Design, so kind of a splinter group off of White Wolf. That's how I first heard about it. I've always liked Dune, like that. There's a little drop of Dune in Revelations of Mars, like you get a little bit of that.
Right.
And so I kind of picked it up, and it's just this political landscape where you have this very high technology empire that kind of grew out into the stars and then collapsed in on itself, and so now it's a dark age. So you have people running around with swords and shields, but the shields are energy based, and there's a church and a guild and noble houses, and I have this fantasy that I'm going to run some sort of George R.R. Martin-esque Fading Suns game at some point, and it just fascinates me for some reason.
That sounds really cool. I'm going to have to see if I can find that one too.
But I grew up playing Shadowrun, a lot of Shadowrun when I was in high school.
Shadowrun was always a fun game.
That was my go-to game, but my shelves are filled with settings and systems. So
yeah, I have several large bookshelves that we got when Borders went out of business that are just full, ceiling to floor. Being a writer, obviously, I assume you do quite a bit of reading. What book are you currently reading?
So I just finished a memoir from a YouTube person.
Oh.
So in addition to everything else that's going on, I keep tabs on kind of new media stuff. So the part of me that's still a transmedia guy is still keeping an eye on things that are new media and the way to kind of cross over a concept to different media. So like, for example, Hollow Earth Expedition is a very popular role-playing game. But I am very much aware that there are people who won't play role-playing games who want to feed Nazis to dinosaurs.
Right.
So there's various ways to do that, and I continue to look for ways to kind of expand that. So anyway, I just finished a memoir by that person. But what I have been reading, just started reading since I finished that book, is Stormbringer from Michael Moorcock. I just decided to reread the Elric saga. There's a group of artists who are doing graphic novels of the Elric books that are just very good, and so I read. They're only kind of done the first book, but it got me reinvested, and so I burned through most of the other books, and now I'm on Stormbringer.
Yeah, nice. That's a good one. a little aside, you keep talking about transmedia, but I get what it means, but I'm not sure everyone will. So do a quick description of what transmedia is.
I think if you can accurately define transmedia, then I think that's actually what qualifies you to get a job doing it. It is a very sort of fuzzy concept by design. So transmedia is basically the way that concepts not just connect with other types of media, but how you can have an experience that transcends different media. So there are various things that are doing this already. So things like, I'm going to use Marvel for an example, right? So Marvel has superheroes, and we'll take, I was going to say Spider-Man as an example, but he's probably a bad one because there's other things going on with him right now. But let's take the Avengers. So the Avengers, we all know, is a blockbuster movie franchise.
Right.
But they also have all of these comic books, and that's actually where that IP originally began. So if I am into the Avengers, I can read a comic book, and I can go to the movies and sort of have this transmedia experience.
Right.
The thing about it is there is a Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then there is the comic book universe, and the two don't necessarily connect exactly.
Right.
Now it seems like they're starting to bring them closer together. So you'll have more of a traditional transmedia experience where I'll read a comic book that will tell me something so when I go to see the movie, I will know more about the movie or have a deeper appreciation of something that happens in the movie because I read the comic book. That's the holy grail that you want.
Right.
Right. I'm learning something I can only get through this comic book.
Right.
Some people I worked with at Microsoft actually created an interactive comic book for a video game called Rise, which is a Roman Empire melee game, fighting game. And the comic book itself had hidden things on it that you could tap on that would give you gold that would then go into your game.
Very nice.
So that's also part of the transmedia experience.
Yeah,
and it's pretty interesting stuff.
It's a very interesting concept, and I think with everyone being as connected as they are now, it's a really good time to start thinking of transmedia. It was probably a good time to think about it 10 years ago, but for people who are behind the times, now is a good time to get into the idea. And I like the idea of transmedia personally because one of the things that always bothered me about like Marvel Cinematic Universe and stuff like that is that it's you're hearing different stories but the same characters, and they're not at all in any way related, and that's very disappointing to somebody who is deeply entrenched in something. I'm an Indiana Jones fan. I love Indiana Jones. I'd love to see the things that happen in some of the old Indies books, be something that happened that continues into the movies. Or Timothy Zahn was one of my favorite writers of all time, and I'd like to see some of his stuff transcend into,
Yep.
That's
actually a very traditional transmedia thing, right? You have the extended universe of books that kind of fit off of the Star Wars movies.
Right.
I was just thinking just now, a more modern example of that is the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show.
Yes.
As it connects to the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yep.
Those two things do exist together. They do crossovers. I remember after Thor: The Dark World came out, the next episode of S.H.I.E.L.D. had them going to London and cleaning up, stuff left over.
Right.
That's the kind of stuff they're trying to do with transmedia, and it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's I'm curious to see where it's going to go, and I'm looking forward to more of that. But I just wanted people to understand, get an idea of what that was. So,
Yes.
So if you were to be portrayed by someone famous on film, who would you want to portray you?
Oh boy!
Tell your life story, basically.
It's too bad that Don Rickles is dead. Not Don Rickles. Don Knotts. Actually,
yes.
Don Knotts probably would have been a perfect example. It's funny. I don't have one of those faces that makes people go, "Oh, you look like that person."
Right.
Instead, my whole life, if I have put on my glasses or grown a beard, people forget who I am. So. I would probably be played by some faceless extra. I think that seems probably appropriate.
I would go with, since that's the case, I would go with Jeffrey Combs because he does everything.
Oh, yes, indeed. And I've never met him, and I would like to because not only has he been in everything and he has that particular look to him, but he was in The Frighteners, and I love that movie. I think it's probably because I worked on Wraith. I think for some reason I just really like that movie. He's great in it.
Yeah,
Steve Buscemi. Steve Buscemi can also play me. I think that would work for me.
There you go. Which three people,
Or
famous?
maybe Bill Paxton, but only if he promised to die.
Yeah, Bill Paxton.
I had a theory for many years that a movie was only good if he died in it.
Well, that narrows it down to he dies in most of his movies, though.
He did, but he died in the Terminator.
Aliens,
Yep.
Tombstone. Yeah.
He died. Yep.
Yeah.
So if he died in it, it was a good movie. It's no longer true anymore. But
yeah, well, he didn't die in Twister, so it held true up until at least then.
Exactly.
Which three people, famous or otherwise, would you invite to a dinner party? Anybody ever existed?
Living or dead?
Living or dead?
Oh boy, I got these. Colonel Dick Winters, who was he was the leader of Easy Company, World War II.
Sure.
Like his book on leadership is truly amazing. So absolutely him. Mark Twain.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
Boy, I would just to hear him talk would be absolutely amazing. And then boy, that's a good question. The third one is a little tricky. Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The conversations that he and Twain would have would be very interesting, I think.
Yeah, Hitchcock is one of my favorite directors, which is kind of weird because he's a very specific genre.
Right.
But I love him for his understanding of the human psyche. Rod Serling. Can I have 4? I want 4. Rod Serling. Oh my God, him too. But Alfred Hitchcock is quoted as saying that the length of a movie will always be dictated by the size of the audience's bladder.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's like, that is a man who understood the way the world worked. But he also used to play with people in a way that I appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
One of the last interviews that he gave, he was in a hotel, and the person who came to interview him met him in his room. They decided to go downstairs to the bar, and they get into the elevator, and they're not really saying anything to each other. You know, you're in an elevator, and you just kind of stand there. But it went down a floor, doors opened, and a bunch of people got on. And as soon as the doors closed, Hitchcock turned to the guy as if they had been having the conversation already and said, "It was the most horrible bloody mess you'd ever seen." And he proceeded to describe this horrific murder scene. And just kind of really just drew it all out until they got to the very bottom. And he timed it such that when the doors opened in the lobby, he said, "But that's not even the worst part," and stops talking. And everybody nice. in the elevator kind of paused and waited for until it got uncomfortable, and then they had to leave the elevator, and so they missed out on what it was. And of course the interviewer, the journalist, turned to him and said, "Okay, I got to know what happened." He said, "Oh, that's just something I do in elevators."
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would be a fun one to have dinner with, although you might have to bring a little extra courses.
Sure, that's fine. I'll work.
Yeah, it'd be worth it. What Looney Tunes character would you be?
Bugs Bunny.
All right.
That was an easy one.
Yeah, what song best describes you?
Pure Imagination from the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Nice.
Yeah, love that one.
What do you think about when you're alone in your car?
Oh, it should be driving. But it
never
not.
is.
It's never about driving.
It's never.
I'm generally either thinking about what it was I've just taken myself away from. Like when I was working on Revelations of Mars, it was usually I need to go to the grocery store to get food, and so I get in the car and my brain is still in front of the keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm still thinking about either what I've just written or what I'm about to write when I actually sit down to write it again.
Yeah, I understand that feeling. Last 3 questions. What's your favorite word?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I have a lot of favorite words. Let's see which one just pops to the top of my head. Corpulent. I've always liked the word corpulent. Maybe because it's such a good descriptor of me. Yeah, I like words like that.
All right. What's your least favorite word?
Oh, no.
Okay. That's a good one.
I'm not a big one on that one. I like to say yes. If you're familiar with the Green Lantern saga, and they have all the different colors being different emotions.
Yeah.
I am a Blue Lantern. I am about hope. I
Right.
like to find the yes in things, not the no.
That's good though. I mean, it follows the improv theory of always say yes and see where it takes you.
Yes, but just also in keeping with my particular personality, the Hope Lanterns can't do anything until they find somebody who can actually get things done. So they need a Green Lantern to really be able to do stuff.
Right.
So,
All right, my last question.
yep.
A giraffe walks into a bar wearing a brown coat and an eye patch. What's the first thing he says?
I thought I told you to fix that.
Nice. I'm actually told that at one time that was used by Microsoft as one of their hiring questions. So.
So Microsoft has a very interesting hiring practice, and you feel free to cut this out, especially if you're running long here. But my interview process at Microsoft was not their normal. So normally what happens is you walked into an interview at Microsoft, they had 3 or 4 people set up for you, hour-long meetings. You meet with them, and they would kind of return you to the lobby every 50 minutes or so, and then they would go away for 5 to 10 minutes to type about you, and then the next person would come in, and you would go through this, have lunch, and then you would find out whether you moved on to the afternoon session where you would meet with the people who kind of would make the final decision on hiring you or not. It's a very set process. With my position, because we were a group of writers and we were different from the get-go, instead of meeting with all of those people, my first interview at Microsoft was with the whole team. And so they brought me in for like an hour and a half. They took me into a conference room, and there was a big conference room table. Behind me was double whiteboards and all of the dry erase markers I could eat. And the other side of the conference room was 7 people, right? They were all sitting there just staring at me. And so they said, here's what's going to happen. We're going to give you a setting, we're going to give you a setup, and then we're going to have you just run with it. So here's your setup. Aliens land in kind of the 1100s North Europe. They attack or are attacked by Vikings and lose. Go. And so for an hour and a half, I had to break out the story. I had to, say, okay, this is how it would work in a video game. Here's if you're going to do transmedia, here's how you would connect it to things. And then they would say, yeah. Our marketing guys say that this could be a blockbuster game for us. So we expand it to a 5-act structure. And so then I expanded it to a 5-act structure and all of that. And I said, our marketing guys came back to us and they said, no, this is not going to do like we thought it was going to do. You better cut it and make it a shorter game. So now make it a 2-act structure. And they basically just poked at me for like an hour and a half, and I was just in heaven.
Nice.
Being a gamer, having a bunch of people sitting across from me at a table throwing stuff at my head, I'm used to that.
Right, absolutely.
And so I had no idea how well I did. I just was spouting nonsense.
Well, you did well enough to get the job, obviously.
Yeah. So I guess it kind of worked. But I walked out of it really happy and had a lot of fun, and thought I have no idea how I did. Basically, when they threw it at me, I kind of froze for like a half a second, and then I said, "Oh, so it's like Beowulf meets War of the Worlds." Nice. And I saw like 2 people on the other side of the table kind of nod their head, and I went, okay, that's it, and I just ran.
Right. That's great. All right. I had a lot of fun.
Yes, thank you, Jeff, so much.
Let's before we go, let's one more time tell everybody where to find you on social media.
So my Twitter is JA-Combos, so I actually use the the first letter of my middle name, JA-Combos. And then you can find me on Facebook, Jeff J. Combos on Facebook. But you can also find Exile Game Studio, Exile Games on Twitter, and also the Exile Games on Facebook as well. And we're working on some other stuff too, but that's basically where you can find us. There's a Hollow Earth Expedition. If you really like Hollow Earth Expedition and don't like me or Ubiquity very much, which I totally understand, then you can join the Hollow Earth Expedition group on Facebook, which is very active with people who are always posting inspirations or questions or characters and all kinds of fun stuff. So
I was part of that for a little while. I don't know if I still am or not, but I think I was. And of course, they can find your site at exilegames.com.
That's correct. Yeah.
So
we are just in the process of making a new site. So probably by the time this comes out, that'll be either up or just about to go up.
Awesome. I was going to say you've got a couple things that need to be updated a little bit there, but it's a good.
Yeah. No, it's a complete revamp. So.
Awesome. So do you have anything else you want to say before we go? Any last thoughts?
Just thank you. Thank you so much. And the people who've actually listened this far, I am sorry, and I thank you very much for listening to me jabber on.
Awesome. All right. I hope to see you at Gen Con. Maybe we'll get you on the show afterwards. You said you've got some other stuff coming out. We'll talk about that for sure.
I'd love that. That'd be great.
I have a lot of questions about the Perils of Mars adventures that I didn't want to get you here today because I didn't want to run over too much. So
right. No, I'll tell you all about them after Gen Con. No problem.
Awesome. All right. That's us for the show today. Thank you for joining us. As always, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at Geek Feed Show. Or you can find me, you can find us on Facebook at Geek Feed Show. You can find me on Twitter at IronNerdivore, and you can find us online at geekfeedshow.com, or the new site for this show is going to be thequest at geekfeedshow.com for those of you who are migrating over from the Iron Nerdivore website. I want to thank everybody for coming. On behalf of myself, my guest, Jeff Combos, and for Exile Games Studios, so long and thanks for all the fish.
Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go. Baby, please don't go back to New Orleans. You know it hurts me so. Baby, I'm way down here. You know I'm way down here. Baby, I'm way down here in a rolling fog. Baby, please.